Hello everyone, my name is Bruce Johnson and welcome to WebDev Lessons. Today is hopefully your first ever lessons video. Today we're going to get into functions, we're going to get into things like GitHub, terminal, and setting up your workspace to work with the rest of WebDev Lessons. The rest of the videos are going to follow the same workflow, so we're just going to go through that together and set everything up so that you're ready to begin. Alright, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so we are going to start out by installing Sublime text. So let's go and type in Sublime text into our web browser, and there we go. This is what we are going to click on. And I'm using a Mac. If you're using Windows, it should say download for Windows. I'm not going to go through the entire install process for both Windows and Mac. If you are on a Windows machine, it might work out better for you to either dual boot or use a virtual machine and actually run Linux or Mac, because we're going to be doing things with the terminal that will require you to have either Linux or Mac. If you are using a Windows machine, and if you have questions about dual booting or running a virtual machine on your current Windows machine, or if none of this is making sense, shoot me an email by going to the contact page on the WebDev Lessons website. Okay, so let's go ahead and download this. And once it's downloaded, for a Mac, you're going to just go ahead and click it, and it will open up magically. And once that's open, you'll be able to just drag this in, and there you go. I'm going to, after do that, of course, keep in dock, and I'm going to move it over here with the rest of my IDs. Alright, so what is this? What did we just install? What are we doing here? This is what's called a text editor, or an IDE. This is where you're going to be doing all of your code. So you're going to be, once we talk about downloading the exercises, you're going to open all the exercise files inside of this Sublime text. If you're already using a text editor or an IDE, you can just use that. It's not crucial that you use Sublime text, but if you're new to coding, I recommend you start here. It's really simple, no overcomplicated stuff, and it'll work perfectly for what we're doing. So the next thing we're going to worry about is downloading the actual exercises. Let's go ahead and move on to GitHub, which should be the link. There should be a link right next to this video on the WebDev Lessons page, and that link will say, well, actually it should look just like this. Or it should say WebDev Functions, GitHub, whatever. It should be clearly marked that it's a GitHub link. And that is going to link you to the GitHub repo. We're going to talk about repos. Don't worry if you don't know what that is yet. So, every video on the WebDev Lessons website is going to have a repo link right next to it. So, let's talk about what this is and what we're going to do with this. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about GitHub and terminal. We're going to get into the commands, we're going to talk about what GitHub is, we're going to talk about all the concepts behind it, and everything you'll need to do to bring your exercises down from GitHub. So, first of all, what is GitHub? GitHub is what's called a version control system. Now, GitHub does a lot of things, and we cannot cover all of them in this video, and it would be a very long video if I tried to. So, first of all, the version control is probably one of GitHub's greatest features, and it's something that allows us to have like a giant undo button for our project, which is really great, because if you write code and then you somehow mess the whole thing up, and it's like, oh my word, you're pulling your hair out because you have a bug that's so big, it's just overwhelmed you and you don't know where to start or how to fix it, you just want to go back to the way things were before the bug, when things were working fine, that's what GitHub is for. It will take you all the way back to before the bug and start you with clean code that you wrote before. All that relies on you using GitHub properly. So we're going to go over all this stuff to do that. So it's a version control system. It also allows you to share code with others, which is why I'm using GitHub to give you the exercises for these videos. So it does a lot of things, and we're going to get into more of that later. But for now, think of it as a version control system and a place to share code. So, first of all, we're going to start from the very beginning. This is the cloud, the GitHub cloud, the GitHub website. So this is on github.com. Nothing is on your computer yet, right? It's all up in this cloud. What we're going to do right now is we are going to build a GitHub repository. So you can think of a GitHub repository as a container that holds all the files for your project. So we've called this particular repository, we've called it Project Repository. Real original, right? But we have an index.html file, which is usually going to be like your home page or the main HTML page of your site. We're going to get into all that later, don't worry. Then we have our script file, we have our CSS, we have maybe an image, and we have our Readme. The Readme is going to be pretty crucial, and we're going to really get in depth in that. You're going to use that pretty much for every single lesson. So pay attention to the Readme file whenever you see it. So we have just built ourselves a GitHub repo or repository. I'm going to call it a repo from now on because that's a lot easier than saying repository. This is our GitHub repo in the cloud with all of our files contained inside of it. Now, rule 1, the most important rule of this class is do not overwrite the original repo. I've created repos for every single lesson. Each repo contains exercises, and I would very much appreciate it if you do not overwrite the original. In fact, it's a requirement that you do not overwrite the original repo. So how do you do this? How do you edit these files and go through the exercises without overwriting the original? Well, GitHub, thankfully, has given us a solution to this problem, and this solution, oddly enough, is called a fork. So, let's go ahead and take our original repo and fork it. So, this is our GitHub repository. What we're going to do now is we are going to fork it. We are going to run the fork command, and I'll show you how to do that on the website. It's actually really easy. It's one button. You click it, and you're good to go. So this is our original repo. We hit fork. Now we have a copy of our original repository. The really neat thing here is that we can edit any file or all the files. We can delete all the files. We can create new files, and they will not overwrite the original. In fact, this one will remain completely separate from our new fork. To show you this, GitHub actually shows you that it's created under your username. So when you first go to GitHub, you will need to create a user account. So make sure you do that. And whatever your username is will show up here after you've forked my original project. This is going to say Bruce773 and whatever the name of the current exercise is. And when you fork it, it's no longer going to say Bruce773. It's going to say your username because you have forked it and made it your own repository. Hopefully that makes sense. So after the first thing you do after you've clicked the GitHub link on the WebDev lessons videos, you're going to fork the repo. Next, we need to figure out how to edit the repo we've just forked. So great, so we have a copy. It's under our username, and any edits or deletions or anything we create is not going to affect the original. So how do we edit the repo we've just forked? So in order to do this, we're going to have to learn another command, which is called clone. We need to clone our original repo, which, by the way, is still in the cloud. we need to clone it to our local machine. So we need to bring it down from the cloud to our computer. Graphically, it's going to look like this. We're going to bring it from the cloud, and remember, this is our forked repo. This is not the original. We're going to bring it down from the cloud to our computer. Once it's on our computer, we can run some commands. Now, to clone it, we're going to go through that process a little bit later, but you're going to clone it using terminal. So make sure by this point you are either running Linux or Mac, because I will not list the terminal commands or the command prompt commands for Windows. So let's say we've just cloned our repo. Great! So we forked it, we've cloned it, now we have our files on our computer. All those files are going to be stored in a folder. So let's say we open up the JavaScript folder, and this is the code that is in that folder. We've opened that, we've opened the JavaScript file. And this is the code that's inside of that JavaScript file. We've opened it with Sublime Text, and next to it we've opened a terminal window. What we're going to do now is we are going to run a command in terminal called git status. It's a good idea to check the status of your local repo frequently, because you're going to want to commit things frequently as well, and we're going to go over commit in a bit. So if you run git status, nothing has changed because we haven't edited the original file yet, and our terminal is going to say your branch is up to date with origin master. That's good. We want to see that. Everything's up to date. We haven't changed anything. We're good to go. All of our stuff is saved in the cloud. We are safe. Now, let's edit some of the code and then run git status. Let's change this to welcome. Now we run git status and it says changes not staged for commit, and it will give you a list of the things that have changed or the files that have not been committed yet or added or staged. You're going to hear that term. That just means that if your file is not staged, it means that GitHub is watching it and it sees there's a change, but it's not included in the next commit. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. Don't get confused yet, all right? So what we need to do now is we need to talk about a few things. We need to talk about adding, committing, and pushing changes. If I'm moving a little bit too fast here, go ahead and move back a couple frames in the video and try watching it over again and just maybe follow along with me, take some notes, write it down, go through it. You're going to have plenty of experience working with this, because every single exercise is going to require that you go through every single one of these steps. So you may want to re-watch this part of the video a couple times, or maybe a few times when you try to do the exercises, just to make sure that you've got everything working. So now let's talk about adding, committing, and pushing the changes. If you've checked your status and there are changes that are not staged for commit, like we saw on the last slides, this is what we need to do. First of all, we need to git add. We need to stage or add our file that has been edited. And you'll do that by typing git add and then whatever the file name is. When you run git status, it will give you the file name you need to add in red. So you can put that file name right here. After you've added it, we need to run git commit. Now, watch here, there are going to be a lot of things that are happening. Don't get overwhelmed. Just write some of it down, or if you have a note program, put these shortcuts into your note program. I'm just about to throw a lot of stuff at you. Don't get overwhelmed. Just try and follow along. You're going to then press I. Once you've typed git commit, press I. Then type your commit message. Let's talk a little bit about what your commit message should be. Your commit message should describe whatever you've just done. So in our example previously, we changed it from hello world to welcome. So you would say changed return statement to welcome. And that would make it clear to you and anyone else looking at your code or looking at your commits what you changed. You want to make it very clear what you are committing. Once you've typed your commit message, type escape, or hit escape, sorry. Then hold Shift W Q. So Shift plus W plus Q. Once you've done that, hit W, Q, and then exclamation mark. Follow along with me. Again, I would watch this section of the video when you're ready to download your exercise. This will walk you through the steps. Once you follow along with this video and do exactly what I'm showing you, you will have no problems with this particular part. It doesn't make a lot of sense right now, but it will once you do it. So don't be confused. After you've done that, all you have to do is hit enter. And finally, you've actually just committed. So bravo, you've got a commit. Your commit is completed and it's on your local machine. Now you need to push the updated repo back into the cloud. So you've updated the local repo that you've cloned. Now we just need to push it back up to github.com so that those changes can be saved and are set for version control. And we're done. That's all you had to do. Nice job. We are done with the GitHub portion of this video. Wow, you made it through that. You're probably asking yourself right now, I thought I was going to do functions. I thought I was going to work with JavaScript. Why am I doing all this GitHub stuff? Well, I want to get you set up for the WebDev lessons workflow, and so that you won't have any problems when you try to download the exercises and you can just focus on the code. I want to make this as simple as I can make it, and I really want to give you a lot of detail so that I don't have anything that's really confusing for you. So hopefully right now GitHub is pretty clear and you understand the concepts. If not, go back and watch them again, because it's crucial that you understand everything we've talked about up till this point. You won't be able to complete any of the exercises without first doing the steps we just completed. When you've solved your exercise, you will be able to do everything from commit forward, from commit to push, all that stuff in between. So complete your exercise, run git status, you'll see your file has changed. Then all you have to do is hit git commit, enter, and then go through all the stuff. And then finally, after you've written your commit message and done all the shortcuts, you can hit git push and it will go up to your cloud. You can refresh your browser at that point and see the changes live on GitHub, on your repo, your forked repo, and then you'll know for sure that they're there. If they're not and you can't figure it out, again, contact page on the WebDev Lessons website. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to help. Alright, so now that we've done that, we're going to cover a little bit of Terminal, because you do need to know how to navigate within Terminal. And what we're going to do is we are going to, right now, I'm going to go with you and we're going to fork and clone and commit and push. We're going to do all that right now with the very first exercise. And we're not going to solve it together, but I am going to give you just some code that I'll put in there. So hopefully this will give you some practice. Do this along with me, so pause the video and ensure that you have Sublime text installed. Make sure that you're running either Mac or Linux. And also make sure that you have your terminal window ready and that you have clicked the GitHub link and you are now on the GitHub page for this video, which should be right next to this video on the WebDev Lessons website. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so we are here on the GitHub repo for the WebDev functions exercise. And what we're going to do is kind of go through all the steps I just did. So first of all, you need to click this fork button. I'm not going to do that because I'm already where I need to be right now. And once you've clicked fork, you should no longer see my name here. You should see your username. I should mention, before you do this, you need to make sure that you have a GitHub username. Make sure that you have a GitHub account. Sign up for it, and then move on to this. Okay, so you forked it. Great. You should have forked it by now. All right. What we're going to do is, first things first, we're going to look at the Readme. In this particular exercise, there isn't anything in this Readme because we're going to go over the lesson today in this video. So for this particular lesson, the Readme is not going to give you any extra information, but you should always check this Readme for details. So now what we're going to do is we are going to click clone, And since we forked it, we now need to clone it. So we're going to copy this link, and we are going to open Terminal. So now Terminal, your terminal window might look a little different, but it should look like this. If you cannot find Terminal, hit Command Space, you should see Spotlight, or you can go up to the top and you may find this little magnifying glass here. Click that, and then type in Terminal, and that will open your terminal window. So we're going to go over a few commands here, and the first one we're going to do is pwd, and that stands for Present Working Directory. So this tells us currently what directory we're in, or what file or folder we are in. So this gives us our full path. This is my current path on my computer. Now, if you're not familiar with folders and paths and stuff like that, look up another video on YouTube for folders. Look up maybe Mac or Linux. They should all be the same, folder and file-wise. Just try and familiarize yourself with the concept of paths. It's really not that complicated, but basically it's stacked like this. So when we have this, obviously this file or folder is inside of this file or folder. Well, this is inside of this folder. So now what we're going to do is we're going to type ls, and that means list. We're going to list everything that's within this. I have a lot of things in this. But when I go up here, backed up to the top, and after I hit ls, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my desktop. And I'm going to say cd, that means change directory. And I'm going to type capital D and then tab. And it's asking me for more information, so maybe I'll give it a few clues, and there we go, it auto-filled. So you don't have to type the whole thing out, as long as you've typed a little bit of it, enough that it can differentiate between the different files, because all of these starts with a capital D, so I had to give it a little bit more help. And then tab, now I can hit enter. And now if you look at my present working directory, real quick though, I'm going to clear this, so it's not overly complicated. Now if I look at my present working directory, you can see I've changed directories. I'm no longer inside of this. I'm now a level deeper. I am inside of this, but I'm the next level deeper. I'm in desktop. So now I could type ls to look at all my files, but what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to type make directory. Make directory, and I'm going to call it WebDev Lessons. Notice I didn't use a space. It's a good idea to stay away from spaces when you're creating files or directory names or folder names. Stay away from spaces. They will be your worst enemy. So now what we're going to do is we are going to say WebDev Lessons, and we'll say exercises. And now this is going to make a folder on my desktop called WebDev Lessons Exercises. So now I'm going to change directory and move into that WebDev Lessons, and there we go. So now if you look at my present working directory, I am inside of that file that I created up here. Hopefully I haven't lost you. I think this should make enough sense. I will visually show you what I've done. So if you look here, this is my desktop, and I've actually created this file through terminal. Remember, we named it WebDev Lessons Exercises. So now I can go inside of here, and this is what I am currently in. If I wanted to make another directory and call it, whoops, it would help if I spelled it right. Make directory, let's call it test file. There we go. As you can see, it created a test file folder here. So that is what our make directory command does. I don't need that, so I'm going to delete it. That was just kind of to show you what's going on here. Okay, great. So now that we're inside of this, we have, don't forget, we've copied this link here. And what we're going to do now is we are going to clone. Remember we talked about cloning. If you don't know what that is, or you've forgotten, go back to the GitHub portion of this video. We are going to type git clone and paste in our link, Control V. And now we can see our WebDev functions. There's our repo. It is now locally on our machine. There we go. We have just downloaded our repo from the cloud. We've cloned it from GitHub. and it is now on our machine, so we can edit it. And editing this file will not edit the original. So perfect, we're right on track here. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to grab this file and drop it into Sublime Text. And there you go. Sublime tells me conveniently all the things listed inside of this. You won't need to worry about many of the files besides this one. The functions.js file is what you're going to want to put all your code in. So notice how it says your code here. You'll see the .js files. Those are usually the ones you want to edit. The spec, that's just for testing your stuff, so don't worry about the spec or the lib. Don't worry about the license. The only 3 files you really need to worry about is the one that's just the .js, then the index.html, and then the readme. Of course, like I said before, this readme is empty, not much information. You don't need to worry about it for this one. You will need to worry about this index.html, but not from this side. Let's jump on over into our terminal real quick, and let's list again what's inside of the directory we're in. Okay, great. We know that that file is there, and let me just keep this up so you can visually see what I'm doing. We have just typed ls, and now it's showing us that this file exists within our present working directory, which to remind you is this. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we are going to, you know what? Might not be a bad idea if I turned on Do Not Disturb. Would have been good to do before recording. Okay, so we are going to change directories here, and we can type tab. Don't forget your tab. That will autocomplete, save a lot of time. So now we can look at our present working directory, and we can see that we are inside of that file. I'm going to clear this so it's not confusing. Now let's type ls, and these are all, notice, you see a similarity here. Notice all the files. We are now inside of this file. So we're now looking, I typed ls to display and list all the things we have here, and you can see them listed here as well. So now what we're going to do is we want to open this index.html file. It's really simple. All we have to do is open index.html. Do this for every exercise. You will need to open index.html. It will have your tests in it, and those tests you will need to pass. That's what your exercise is all about. So let's hit enter, and here we go. We have a failing test here. So this is our exercise. We need to make this test pass. So we don't know how to do that yet because we really haven't gotten into any JavaScript. So what we're going to do right now is we are going to finally get into some JavaScript. We've talked enough about GitHub and terminal and all that stuff, which is completely necessary for these lessons and for a lot of dev companies you'll need to work for. But now we're going to get into some code. So what we're going to talk about right now are functions. Functions are extremely important in JavaScript, and they are used almost all the time. You will see them everywhere. You're going to use them every single day when you code, and you will use them for a lot of different purposes. There are 2 main parts of a function. So let's talk about those 2 parts right now. First of all, we have what's called our function definition. And then we have what's called our invocation. This is where we invoke our function. So we could say our invocation where we invoke our function. So without these 2 parts, your function will never get run. Without a definition, there will be nothing for your invocation to invoke. It won't exist. Without an invocation, your definition will never get run. The code inside of your definition will actually never happen. It will never exist until you invoke it. It exists in memory, but it's never called or run by the computer. So what we're going to do here is we're going to talk about 2 different ways to define a function. The first would be to do this. Function, and then your function name. Usually, you want the name of your function to be a verb. Your functions are usually going to do something, So we might say, let's call this function say hello world. Now, what did I do with this? What is this capital H and capital W? Why don't I just put a space here and do an H like this, and then put a space here and do it like this? Well, the reason is that obviously, our text editor is telling us, no, this won't work. It's putting it in a different color, which is a great reason for why we use this text editor. But also, we need to use something called Camel Case. This helps things from being less confusing, or this helps things to be less confusing. If we were to do it like this, and we had a really long function name, say hello world to the rest of the world for me, that just looks like a jumble of letters. So what we're going to do is we use something called Camel Case in JavaScript. Whenever you're naming things, this could be for variables, which we're going to talk about later. Don't panic. We haven't talked about it yet. This could be for functions. This could be for most things. You're going to use what's called Camel Case. So that's Camel Case in a nutshell. The first word is going to be lowercase, the first letter of the first word. Then every word after that, your first letter is going to be capitalized. All right. So once we name our function, we need to put open and close parenthesis, and then an open and close curly bracket or curly Q or whatever you call them, and then enter. Now notice our text editor has already beautifully formatted everything for us. This is the format we want. Formatting is important for JavaScript. It needs to be indented. It needs to have this down a line. I mean, it doesn't need that, but it would look very confusing and would be very hard to read if you didn't. You want to focus on readability with JavaScript. We're going to get into this later, so don't worry about it yet. But readability is a big deal. So just format it the way I'm showing you, and usually if you just hit enter, it'll format itself, which is great. Notice I've been doing this along the way. I've been hitting Control S. See how that lit up and that went away? If I edit something here, like let's say I get rid of that, notice this is telling me I don't have something saved. So you could go to File and then Save, but there it is, Control S or Command S. So it's good to use keyboard shortcuts. Keyboard shortcuts are going to save you a lot of time as a developer, and you really just want to strive to do as many things without the mouse as you possibly can. Okay, so enough on that rabbit trail. Let's talk about what we've just done here. We've created a function with a function keyword. We've named it. We've used curling or parentheses, and we're going to talk about what those are in a later lesson. And we've done an open and close curly Q or curly bracket. So everything in here is our function definition. So this is our function definition. By the way, what I'm doing here, what I'm doing here with these double slashes, with this // that's a comment, and that code is just, it's not code. It doesn't get run. The computer just jumps over it and acts like it's not even there. So you can write things like what I wrote here. I wrote your assignment in a comment. I told you this is where you write your code. I'm labeling things. It's important to label things, and we'll discuss that later. But labeling things is going to save you a lot of time, and it's really going to make your code more readable. So label everything with comments. Okay. So in here is our function definition. So I promised you I would show you two ways to do this. That's the first way. Second way is to put it inside a variable. And we're going to talk about variables in just a second. So I'm going to copy this code and put it right here, because there's really no need to repeat myself. I've already got it written. And there we go. It's not too different. The only thing is we've taken this out from in between our function and our two parentheses, and we've popped it on another side of an equal sign after a var keyword. Okay, when I talk about keywords, those are reserved words. Those are words that JavaScript uses, and they mean something to the JavaScript language. Okay, so what we've got here is a function definition. So we can copy this and put this in here. And we've got a variable. Now, what's a variable? The best way to describe a variable would be to say a variable is a container. This is our var. A var is a variable, and a variable is a container. So, oh yeah, by the way, if you see this pop up, ignore it. You just hit cancel and you're good. So a variable is a container. So anything I put in that container is usable later, and you can change that, and you can use it the way you'd use a box. Put something in it, take something out, reference it. You can run calculations with it, and we're going to use them a lot later. But just for now, think of a variable as a container. On one side, we name our variables. So let's name it text. And then on the other side, we give it some data. So in this sense, I'm going to say hello world. And there we go. I've named my variable text, and I've given it data, and the data is a string hello world. We're going to talk about strings a little bit later. You will need to know what strings are for this exercise, but I might make a part 2 video for this particular exercise. So here's our var text hello world. So now I can reference this, and if I were to console log, don't worry about this yet. I know I'm throwing a lot at you, but console logs we will get into later. If I were to, what's a better way of saying this? Let's say if I were to print this, or I were to display this, or I were to show the user something, if I wanted to print text, this would result in, take a guess, okay? This would actually result in hello world. Now, if I were to edit this variable and put an exclamation mark, this would also change because our variable changes everywhere. Okay, great. So there we've talked about a little bit about variables, not too in depth or why we'd need them yet, but we'll get to that later. So now what we're going to do is get back to functions, okay? So these are our 2 ways of defining functions. For the duration of this course, we're going to ignore this one for now, and we're just going to use this one. So that's our definition, and our invocation happens like this. Done. That's it. We have just invoked our function. It's that easy. Everything that we put in here, so like if we wanted to say print this text, hello world, then as soon as we run this, we would immediately get, you guessed it, hello world. Boom. So there's our invocation, and there is our definition. Our function does not get run, this code does not get run until we invoke it, and we cannot invoke something that we have not defined. So if this did not exist, let me comment this out, then this would give us an error. It would throw an error and say, what? What are you talking about? Say hello world, that's not a function, it doesn't exist. I don't know what you're talking about. It would say say hello world is not a function, or it's undefined. It has no idea what we're talking about. Now, it would know what we're talking about. So, hopefully I've shown you thoroughly what function definitions are and what invocations are. And we've gone through a little bit of that. If you're confused at this point, go back, watch the video again. Hopefully you'll get it the second time around. I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, and if you're a beginner to code, I'm sorry, this is a lot of stuff. But what we're going to do is we are going to actually move on and just teach you the next thing you'll need to solve this problem. Okay? So we're going to talk about strings. And we're going to talk about returning something from a function. So every function usually you're going to want it to have side effects, which means you want it to change something or do something. It wouldn't make much sense if this function were empty and it didn't do anything, right? So we want to have this function return something. We want this to, when we invoke this function, we want it to be something, right? So what should the return value of this function be? Well, in this function, we can set a return value. We can say when you're run, return whatever I put in here. So for this particular case, what we're going to say is we want to return hello world. Now notice these quotation marks. This signifies that whatever's in between them, in this case a phrase hello world, that is a string. A string is a data type in JavaScript. We're going to get into other data types later, but for now, the only data types you need to worry about are strings and numbers. So, in this particular case, if I tried to return 9 plus 3, what would I get? Well, I would probably get something that looked a little bit like this. It would give me a string. And it would not treat it as numbers, it would treat it as strings. It would treat it the same way as if I did this. If I did definition plus invocation, right? It would blob them together. They're strings. They are not numbers. They cannot be added. You can't do math on a string. It is a string. Text or number or what have you, but you cannot add them together. Now, if we wanted to, say, do some math, we could do it this way. We could take it out of there and actually make them real numbers. So these data types now, 3 and 3, have data types of numbers. They're no longer strings. Hopefully that makes sense. This would return, see if you can guess, this would return 6. It would actually add them together and perform the operation we've indicated here. So, that's the difference between numbers and strings. Now, how would you run this code? How would you know that? How would you experiment with this? It's a good question. Here's what I'm going to show you right now. I would recommend that you install Google Chrome. Chrome has things built in called developer tools. Developer tools are amazing, and it's one of the best things Google has done. What we're going to do is we're going to go to a page called about:blank. So type that in. Then right-click on your page and hit Inspect. Now, we're going to go to these arrows. We're going to click on Sources, and let's click these and just pull it out. There we go. Just like this. Now, we're going to go over here. This will usually be on page. We want to hit Snippets, New Snippet, and this is where you can write your code. Allow me to close these. These are my snippets that I've had open. In here, remember, we've copied our code. Now we're going to paste it. Here is our code. We're going to hit Command Return or Command Enter. And look at that. We get hello world because we have invoked our function. Our definition of the function we're invoking returns the string hello world. Now, you should have enough information to be able to solve what we've said here. Now, I do want to really quickly go through the process of GitHub and committing and pushing and all that stuff. So what we're going to do here is we are going to say a function has 2 parts. That's all we're going to do from me. That's all I'm going to do. This is where you would put your code. You can put your code underneath here to solve this particular problem. Alright, now remember, this problem says create a function called return 2 plus 3 that returns the string 2 plus 3. The return value must be a string. You can check to make sure that you've completed your exercise by looking back at this HTML file we opened earlier. If this is a green check mark next to it, you've passed. Great job. If not, you've done something wrong. You need to go back and look at your code and try again. So, I have added some code, right? And I've saved. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open terminal and I'm going to say git status. Now look, ooh, what do we have here? Modified function JS. So we need to run git add function JS. Now git commit, and now and we're gonna write a commit message, and I'm gonna say added comments for function for more, let's say for more function information, and then escape, shift WQ, and there we go. Git push, and now it's been pushed to GitHub. If I open my repo, it now says added comments for more function information, and I can see the file I've changed by looking here, and there they are. So there we go. Wow, that was a lot of information I just threw at you. I'm sorry if you're a little confused right now. Hopefully you should have enough information right now to solve the exercises in the WebDev functions repo. You should know how to fork and then clone and then solve it, and then you should be able to add and then commit and then push, and all your stuff should be up in the cloud, which is great. That is a lot of stuff for one video. Most videos will not be this long. They should only be 20 minutes, maybe half an hour max. This will be the biggest video because it's just going through everything you need to go through the rest of them. So in the next videos, we're going to start talking a little bit more about functions. We're going to move into some more exercises for you to do, and we're going to give you some more experience and practice working with both GitHub and these functions. So good luck. I hope you stayed with us this far. I hope you followed along and you didn't have any troubles. If you did, go to the contact page on the WebDev Lessons website and feel free to shoot me a message, an email, Slack message, whatever I have on there. I'll probably be updating it and adding more stuff, so whichever works for you, go ahead and use it. Good luck and happy coding. We'll see you in the next video.